So, Lone Rider here, and I just want to throw a question out there for all the people that have been suggesting that we disband here in America the ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Authority. This is a suggestion that just kind of came up out of the blue. I think in response to all the talk about the families being separated at the border that was inundating the news these last few weeks. And if that's the case, I mean, I can sort of see why people would support the sentiment in as much as nobody likes to see families get separated. Here's my problem. If your idea is that the solution to the problem with illegal border crossings and what to do about it and then that sort of thing, if your idea of a solution to that is to disband the people who enforce the border laws, I guess the question I then have is, what would you do instead? Like, okay, you disband ICE, then what? Can anybody just come across the border? What mechanism do we have to enforce it? And I think the problem here is that people are confusing an unfortunate situation, in this case, the separation of families, with having a border at all. I think people are looking at this and they say, well, if having a border means this is what's going to happen, then the heck with it. Let's not have a border. The problem is that a country, by definition, inhabits a certain geographical area. Within that geographical area, its laws, its cultures, its customs apply. They stop at the border, and so do the laws and customs of outside countries. So, if you have, for example, your First Amendment protections in the United States to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, etc., these things are guaranteed here. They're sacrosanct. They're not supposed to be violated. You go outside the border of the United States, you have those moral rights as a human being, but the jurisdiction you find yourself in may not recognize them, etc. So, you can't really, because a country isn't just a collection of people who happen to all be living in the same spot, but because it also has a form of government, a society, a set of laws, etc., rules and customs. Those laws and rules and customs and the authority of that government exist where? In that geographical boundary. You can't have a country conceptually without having a border. So, part of me understands why people are tempted to just say, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. But think about it for more than 5 seconds, because you'll realize that's an absurd thing to do. I understand why people are unhappy with ICE. The question then becomes, I guess, if we get rid of them, what will we do instead? And if your response is we shouldn't do anything instead, then what you're saying is that you don't think a country should have a border, which I guess means that you don't believe in countries, because, again, having a border is part of being a country. So, if you don't believe in countries, that's fine. But, a lot of the rest of us do, and we actually would prefer to live in this one as opposed to others. So, the idea, if we just got rid of the border, okay, so what happens then, right? What happens then, literally? There's no answer, all right? There's no answer. Right now, we have lax border enforcement, and we have a huge problem with what to do with all the people who come here illegally and all of that. And the question, the questions that arise from this are all important, and none of them have easy answers. But they're questions we have to ask, because ultimately, we do have to have a border as a country. I'm not saying we should necessarily have a wall or a fence or this or that or the next thing, although I think if you do have a big problem with people illegally crossing the border, I certainly understand why that's a popular suggestion. If you have a problem with people trespassing on your property, what's one of the first things that people usually do if that's a concern? They put a fence around their yard, right? It's just, you have a problem with people coming into your garage and taking your tools without asking you. What do? You lock the door. It doesn't mean nobody can come in. They just got to knock on the door and you get a good look at who they are before you decide to let them in or not. And I understand why these these things all resonate emotionally with people, and I understand why there's people on both sides of this debate who are very worked up. But my problem is when you have the charlatans and the people who engage in intellectual dishonesty. Is, oh, well, let's just disband. There's concerns about how we can enforce the border, you know, without looking like a bunch of heartless jerks. So let's just not enforce the border. No, okay, and maybe, you know, nobody wants to separate families, but maybe we should consider that, generally speaking, when a person breaks the law, they're usually separated from their family. I mean, if you get caught driving drunk and you kill somebody, or you rob a bank, or you do whatever it is you do that's against the law, and you're sent to jail because of that, you're separated from your family, right? So, I mean, generally speaking, whenever anybody breaks the law, there's a risk they're going to get separated from their family. Should we let all the people who are in jail for doing bad crimes, should we let them all loose because they shouldn't be separated from their family? No, they're in jail because they did something against the law, and frankly, their family's probably safer from them with them in jail. Now, the question, of course, with the people here illegally is that, except for violating the border laws, are they necessarily criminals in the sense of, you know, felons or people who would do something violent? We don't know. Most of them, maybe not. But the thing is that, you know, you can't have a country without a border, and to just say, well, let's just disband the border enforcement people. Yeah, okay, then what? I mean, do you just have anarchy? Can anybody just come in? What if somebody wants to come in and do some really, really bad stuff, like blow up a bomb, right? I mean, obviously, there could be somebody here in this country who wants to do that, but the point is, it's not like the world is this wonderful, you know, like nirvana. You look around the world and you see a lot of places where there's a lot of really bad stuff going on. All right. You know, there's a lot of stuff in this country that isn't perfect, but you look around the world and you see some really bad stuff, right? You see death squads, you see terrorists, you see wars, you see genocide, all this nasty stuff. And the border is what keeps that stuff there and us here. All right. So you want to remove that? How's that going to work? What happens the first time that one of those really, really nasty bad people, maybe some genocidal maniac, wants to come in and blow up a bomb or something? Right? Well, what's going to stop him? You just waltz on across the border just like everybody else, right? Because there is no border, right? You're not enforcing it anymore. So, again, I'll reiterate, if you want to get rid of ICE, if you want to get rid of ICE, okay, fair suggestion. I'm going to ask you, what would you do instead? And if you're just like, well, we shouldn't do anything instead, we should just not have a border, I think you should go back and rethink this. Spend maybe more than 5 seconds on it, because that's a horrible idea, okay? That's, frankly, that's a good way to get somebody hurt or killed, all right? That's something, you know, file this under "it will not end well." Lone Rider out.